Right now, you are probably getting ready for work, sitting at your desk, recovering from a long shift, or dreading the tasks waiting for you tomorrow morning. Your alarm, your morning commute, your inbox, your deadlines, and even your weekend plans all revolve around one central thing: your job. But for the vast majority of human history, jobs didn't exist. There were no job applications, no awkward interviews, no annual performance reviews, and no giving 2 weeks' notice. For roughly 290,000 years, Homo sapiens lived without a career, a paycheck, or anything remotely resembling a modern work life. So, what did people actually do all day? The answer is surprisingly uncomfortable because it forces us to look in the mirror and ask, is our modern work system the logical end result of human progress, or is it actually one of the strangest, most unnatural setups we've ever invented? Ancient humans weren't just sitting around being lazy. They tracked game, dug up root vegetables, hauled water, crafted tools, raised kids, cooked meals, fixed their shelters, and looked out for each other. But their daily effort wasn't ruled by a clock. There was no boss tracking their hours, no corporate software measuring their output, and zero reason to keep grinding once the essential tasks were done. You did what needed to be done to survive, and then you stopped. That might be the biggest difference between their world and ours. Back then, work was just a small piece of life, not something that swallowed your entire existence. When anthropologists study hunter-gatherer communities, they consistently find that securing food actually takes way less time than you'd think. Sure, the exact numbers fluctuate based on the season, the local environment, and how you define labor. But in many well-documented groups, adults spent only a few hours a day on core survival tasks like hunting, foraging, preparing meals, and keeping up the campsite. Take the Hadza people of northern Tanzania, for example. The men might head out to hunt for a few hours in the morning, while the women forage for tubers and berries together in groups. By early afternoon, most of the day's essential work is already wrapped up. The rest of the day isn't just wasted time either. People sit around chatting, resting, playing with their kids, fixing up gear, making jewelry, singing, and passing down stories. When modern Americans hear about this, we naturally assume it sounds like desperate poverty. But what they really had was something even the wealthiest executives today can barely afford: true, unstructured, free time. And that's where this conversation gets interesting. Because if human beings were able to thrive without spending the majority of their waking hours grinding, then the standard 40-hour work week isn't some fundamental law of nature. It's just a historical social contract we agreed to later on. We're often brought up to believe that prehistoric life was one continuous, panic-inducing emergency, that every morning started with near starvation, every hunt was a coin toss with death, and every waking moment was spent desperately searching for calories. Now, to be fair, that world definitely had its share of real dangers: hunger, severe injuries, disease, violence, and plain bad luck. We shouldn't put on rose-colored glasses. But skilled hunter-gatherers weren't clueless tourists lost in the woods. They held a deep, master-level understanding of their local ecosystems, plant life, water sources, animal behavior, and changing weather patterns. Finding food was hard, but their sheer expertise made that hardship manageable. When food ran low in one area, they didn't panic. They simply packed up and adapted. Survival didn't depend on doing the exact same repetitive task for 40 years. It depended on versatility. An adult back then needed a massive, practical library of skills just to get through the day. They didn't have specialized jobs. They had real-world competence. If basic survival didn't eat up every single hour of the day, that leaves a big question. What did they do with all that leftover time? They spent it creating things that had zero immediate survival value. We've discovered cave paintings over 40,000 years old that feature incredible movement, depth, and deliberate artistic composition. Seashells were transformed into detailed necklaces. Animal bones were drilled with precise holes to make flutes. Even basic stone tools were often carved with far more care and aesthetic beauty than pure functionality required. Think about that for a second. Someone took the time to crawl deep underground ground and paint animals by flickering firelight. Someone else carefully drilled a shell just to wear it around their neck. Someone carved a bone flute and discovered music. None of those activities put food on the table or built a stronger shelter, but they gave life texture and meaning. Art wasn't a side hustle crammed into a 2-hour window between a commute and bedtime. Art was simply what humans did whenever survival left room for expression. Then, about 12,000 years ago, everything shifted. Agriculture started taking root across different corners of the globe. Textbooks often frame the agricultural revolution as the glorious moment humanity finally conquered nature and escaped uncertainty. But farming fundamentally altered the rhythm of daily life in ways that weren't always an upgrade for the individual worker. A plot of land that took months of grueling physical labor to clear couldn't just be walked away from. Seeds had to be planted, weeds constantly pulled, water channels managed, crops guarded against pests, and harvests brought in and stored. While hunting and foraging required intense effort, the work stopped the moment your immediate needs were met. Agriculture, on the other hand, created an endless, relentless work cycle tied directly to the calendar, and humanity hasn't really clocked out since. Gemini Shunadide. The land didn't care if you were exhausted. And once a community became dependent on stored crops, walking away was no longer an option. People built permanent homes, claimed land, hoarded grain, raised livestock, and defended their borders. For the first time in human history, survival was no longer just about practical knowledge and mobility. It was tied directly to property. Human skeletons from this era tell a pretty brutal story about that transition. In many regions, early farmers were actually shorter than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. As diets shifted heavily towards starchy, single-crop staples, tooth decay skyrocketed, alongside nutritional deficiencies, infectious diseases, and severe repetitive stress injuries. Agriculture could feed far more people on the exact same patch of dirt, but supporting a larger population didn't mean those individuals were living healthier lives. This brings us to the ultimate paradox of human civilization. A society can expand exponentially, while the people running it grow increasingly burned out. Farming created a surplus. That surplus fueled larger towns, complex administrations, standing armies, global trade, organized taxation, and rigid social hierarchies. Civilization was booming, but the average person was grinding twice as hard just to keep the machine running. Back in a hunter-gatherer band, skills naturally overlapped. People had their own strengths, but almost everyone knew the core survival basics: tracking game, foraging, lighting fires, raising kids, preparing food, and making basic tools. Agricultural societies, on the other hand, created deep specialization. Potters made pottery, weavers made textiles, masons built structures, soldiers fought, and tax collectors counted grain. Specialization undeniably boosted efficiency and expertise, but it introduced something totally new: total dependency. If you spend 12 hours a day making clay pots, you have to rely on complete strangers for literally everything else you need to survive. The potter relies on the farmer relies on the blacksmith, and everyone relies on the broader system. And large systems require rules, strict schedules, property rights, and people in authority to enforce them. Jobs didn't suddenly appear because humans got smarter. Jobs emerged because complex, massive societies made individuals completely dependent on the system, and a lot easier to control. No single generation woke up, held a meeting, and voted to trade their personal freedom for corporate hierarchy. The shift happened slowly over generations. Land got claimed, food stores were locked up, leaders consolidated power, and daily chores turned into lifelong inherited occupations. By the time the modern structure fully locked into place, stepping away was nearly impossible. Land was owned, food was controlled, taxes were due, and borders were guarded. Freedom had become prohibitively expensive. Hunter-gatherer groups were far from utopian societies, but anthropologists point out that mobile bands had built-in mechanisms to keep power in check. Arrogance was mocked, food was shared equally, and anyone trying to play the tyrant was actively resisted or simply left behind. Mobility was the ultimate form of leverage. If a group leader became intolerable, people could just pack up and walk away into the wilderness. Farmers couldn't do that. You can't walk away from an established field, a grain silo, a home, and generations of cleared land. The more property humanity accumulated, the more we ended up owned by the very things we created. For thousands of years, most people still didn't have careers in the modern sense. They had family farms, trades, debts, obligations, and local masters. The modern job, where you sell your time in exact, measured hourly blocks to a company, didn't fully take over until the Industrial Revolution. Factories demanded that hundreds of workers show up at the exact same minute. Assembly lines and heavy machinery dictated the pace of human life. Clocks stopped just tracking time and started controlling it. People no longer worked until the job was finished. They worked until the factory whistle blew. 12 to 14-hour shifts were standard. Kids were sent down into coal mines and onto dangerous factory floors. Industrial accidents tore through bodies, and employers simply replaced broken workers with new ones. Factory work stripped people of any connection to what they were making. You simply performed the same mind-numbing physical motion thousands of times a day in exchange for a paycheck. This wasn't just work getting harder. It was human life being converted into a tradable commodity. The modern work week wasn't some generous gift handed down by benevolent corporate leaders. It was fought for by everyday workers who organized, marched, went on strike, and sometimes even lost their lives, demanding fair pay, safer conditions, and shorter hours. The 8-hour day was once considered a radical idea. The concept of a 2-day weekend was a hard-fought political victory. OSHA safety rules were written in the aftermath of entirely preventable tragedies. But after those hard-won victories, something strange happened. We stopped pushing. We accepted the 40-hour work week as the absolute, unquestionable default. Technology accelerated. Productivity reached record highs, but the promised era of effortless leisure never actually arrived. Instead, work simply followed us home. The factory whistle became the smartphone notification. The overbearing supervisor became the late-night Slack message. The office didn't disappear. It just moved directly into our back pockets. Interestingly enough, historical records suggest that medieval peasants actually had far more time off than we do, enjoying dozens of religious holidays, local festivals, and seasonal breaks, even if planting and harvest seasons were brutal. Direct comparisons are tough because historical records are incomplete and unpaid labor often gets left out of the equation. But the core contradiction is impossible to ignore. Modern technology generates extraordinary wealth and abundance, yet most people feel chronically starved for time. We have bullet trains and high-speed highways, but our daily commutes are longer than ever. We have instant global communication, but it's almost impossible to actually disconnect. We have homes filled with Roombas and time-saving appliances, yet the people living inside them are completely burnt out. We gained unprecedented physical comfort, but we didn't necessarily gain freedom. Because over time, our jobs stopped being just something we do. They became the core of who we are. When you meet someone new at a barbecue or a networking event, the very first question is almost always, "So, what do you do?" Everyone knows what that really means. How do you earn a paycheck? We rarely ask, "What are you passionate about? What makes you feel alive? What do you build or create when there's no money on the line?" Employment became our entire identity. Lose your job tomorrow, and you don't just lose an income stream. You lose your daily routine, your social status, your community, and the story you tell yourself about who you are. That's an overwhelming amount of personal meaning to pack into a corporate employment contract. Ancient humans had roles, absolutely. They had serious responsibilities, and they contributed to the survival of their tribe. But they didn't have to crush their entire human identity into a single, hyper-specialized economic function. One day they could hunt, the next, they could nurse a friend, tell stories around the fire, repair gear, or simply be when there was nothing pressing to do. Now, to be clear, Prehistoric life was no walk in the park. Ancient humans dealt with brutal physical injuries, rampant infections, seasonal starvation, high infant mortality, and constant environmental threats that modern medicine easily handles today. Civilization brought us modern sanitation, advanced surgery, life-saving vaccines, baseline literacy, and protection from unbelievable amounts of daily suffering. So the question isn't whether we should abandon society and run off into the woods. The real question is, did human progress have to consume so much of our personal time? Is it possible to keep our advanced medicine, our incredible technology, and our societal stability while reclaiming our day-to-day autonomy? Could our massive gains in AI and automation actually lead to shorter work weeks instead of just higher performance targets? Can work become just one piece of a full life again, instead of the rigid frame that holds everything else together? That's not empty nostalgia. That's a serious design question for our future. Tomorrow morning, your alarm is still going to go off. You'll probably still jump in your car or jump on the subway, open up your laptop, sit through meetings, and trade a chunk of your day for the dollars you need to pay rent and buy groceries. But hopefully, you see the machine a little differently now. It's not natural and it's not inevitable. It's just history. For almost the entirety of human existence, no one had a resume. No one was grinding for a promotion. No one saved up their freedom for a retirement account at age 65. People worked because something immediate needed to get done. And once it was done, life carried on. They talked, rested, played games, played music, painted on cave walls, raised kids, stared into the fire, and told stories. They didn't spend their entire youth trying to earn the right to live later in life. They were already living. Maybe that's what we're all secretly trying to buy back with our PTO, our long weekends, remote work arrangements, side hustles, and 401k plans. Not luxury goods, just time. Our ancestors had it naturally, without even having a name for it. We named it, put a price tag on it, scheduled it down to the minute, and now we spend our entire lives trying to buy it back. So ask yourself, if modern technology allows us to produce more abundance than any civilization in human history, why are we still handing over the majority of our lives to a job? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to keep exploring the hidden systems that shaped our modern world. Because the society we inherited was built by human decisions, and anything humans built can be re-examined.